If you don't feel like going into the attic every time you want to change a light bulb, we'll add 3 things. 1, the retractable cord reel. 2, a limit switch, which will keep us from pulling the chandelier right through the ceiling. And 3, a key switch and control that allows us to move the chandelier. Here's the retractable cord reel. The way they normally work is when you pull them out to a certain distance, they ratchet and lock themselves in place. That's great for when you have tools attached to them, but when the chandelier comes back up, we want the cord to go up. Inside, you'll find a little locking mechanism that keeps the cord reel from turning at certain points, and it's held in place by a spring. You just basically want to unhook that spring, turn that out of the way, and then get a piece of tape and just tape it out of the way like this. If you want to, you can just rip it completely out, but doing it this way, you can always revert back if you ever want to. For this project, this cord end is not the best. I'd rather have this. And also, I can't have this knob in the way. So I'm just going to cut off the end of this extension cord, and then I'll put this on here, making a small extension cord out of this thing, and then put this on here for my project. This is probably overkill, but just for safety I added a wire attached to the grounding lug, and then I drilled a hole through the back of this connector. This will come out and tie onto the winch cable, which in turn connects to the chandelier and provides a ground wire for it. Now, using that hook, I'm going to mount the electrical cord reel as close as possible to the winch so that the electrical cord runs in parallel with the steel cable, which in my case is right there. Next, I'll tie the end of the electrical cord reel to the winch cable so that it goes up and down with the chandelier. And then I plugged my chandelier right into that. Next, we need a winch cable guide to make sure that the shroud of the chandelier comes up centered on the hole and not off to the side, leaving a gap like that. So you can see what I've done is I've mounted a 4x4 about 16 inches tall to this joist, and then I made this other little piece of wood. It's actually 2 pieces of wood with V's cut in both sides. And basically I'm just going to clamp that onto the wire, put the other screw in here, and then use this to push the wire out exactly where I want it, and then screw it down here. Now I'm going to make the limit switch. I'm going to start with a regular house switch that I've modified. Is take a piece of baling wire and bend it in this shape, drill a hole through the bottom of the switch, and attach that to a spring so it pulls back. I'll cut a slot in the top of this switch so that the winch cable will slide easily in it, but then there will be a bump in the winch cable, so when it gets to the right point, it'll push up like this and stop the winch. Here's the complete switch. You can see I've got a slot cut in it, and also I've got a hole drilled through and through so I can stick a pin through here to hold the cable. Next, I want to mount the switch so it's right on the wire like this, but as you can see, the electrical box is too tall. What I'm going to do is cut it down a little bit so it'll fit. Next, I'll use a Dremel to cut out an area on top and bottom so that this thing will fit right over this board and I can bolt it on. Here's the result. Here's the whole thing installed. The switch is mounted to the box is mounted to this board, and this board is clamped to the post right now with a big bar clamp, but eventually this is going to come off when I get this adjusted up and down properly, and some screws will go in there to hold it in instead. And then to lock this wire in to make sure it doesn't ever pop out, just take a piece of baling wire, stick it through like this, and then just bend it down on both sides. Every winch has a safety shutoff switch. When the end of the cable gets up to the winch, it hits a lever which pushes on a switch and turns off power to the winch. Unfortunately, mine no longer does because I ripped it off for another project. What you'll need to do on your winch is find that switch and extend the 2 wires that go to that over to our limit switch. I attach the winch shutoff wire to the limit switch so that when the chandelier gets high enough, it pushes on this and stops the winch. I use that same technique of tightly wrapping baling wire around the lifting cable to provide a bump that will turn off the switch. Here's the limit switch completely installed. I replaced the bar clamp with 2 screws to hold this thing in place. You can see the bump in the cable down here. When I run it up, it'll hit this switch and turn it off right as the chandelier hits the top. When the chandelier was in the up position and before I put the limit switch in, I accidentally hit the up button and I completely mashed my shroud. Fortunately, I was able to bang it back into shape with a hammer and a block of wood, and I'm going to have to repaint it, but just be careful this doesn't happen to you. Next, we're going to mount the control switch on the wall. If you have a stud finder, use it to find a stud where you want to mount the switch. If not, you can use a magnet to find one of the drywall screws in the stud. Switch boxes are usually centered about 49 inches off the floor, so we'll start there. Using a drywall saw, we'll cut into the drywall and cut towards the stud. So we can trace a line all the way around our box and cut out the hole. Next, we need to extend the remote control downstairs. So if you open it up, you'll find that, at least in my case, there are 4 wires. I've got white, blue, black, and brown that go out of this remote. So that means there's 4 wires in this cable that need to be extended. So I'm going to extend it with regular house wire, which means you shouldn't use the ground wire. So you've got 2 here, and I'll need another 2. So I'll have 2 of these leads running from this position down to my switch downstairs. And I can just take and cut off a reasonable length of this, and then put my electrical wire from here downstairs. Next, I'll drill a hole from the attic down to the switch and push my wires down. I put my cutoff cable from the winch and my 2 extension wires into a little electrical box. Now I'll secure the electrical box to a joist with a cover plate and a couple of screws. Now we'd like to put the insulation back, but we don't want it to fall down that hole. So I took a empty gallon vinegar bottle and cut out a piece of plastic. You could use a milk jug. And screw it in place against the joist and start putting the fuzz back. And that's what the finished product looks like in the attic. Next, I'll take all the electrical components out of the control and strip off this rubber coating. Next, you want to take a blank electrical plate and, using a drill and a Dremel, cut out shapes for your key switch and rocker switch and mount them in. In my case, I'm going to be using this metal insert instead. And here are the wires from the attic. For post-construction installation, you can buy electrical boxes that actually have tabs that reach in and grab the drywall to hold them in place. I'm just going to use a standard box and pull out the nails and cut off these tabs, and then drill 2 holes so that I can mount it sideways, since I have a stud right there. Here I've wired the original control switch to the extension wires. Now we just need to test and see if it works. And it does. Now for the key switch. It has 2 terminals on the back, and I've added 2 wires. These 2 wires are going to have to break the power wire. We'll have to use trial and error to figure out which one of these shuts off the winch. My guess is black, because that's usually power. Sure enough, with the blue, brown, and white wires still connected, but black disconnected, the winch doesn't run at all. So we need to take the wires from the key switch and put them across our power wire to provide a safety lockout. Here's everything before it gets mounted in the hole. Notice I had to extend the capacitor wires, and the capacitor is going to dangle down inside here below the box. And here's what it looks like installed. To make a fake cover switch plate, I took a normal switch like this, drilled out here and here to remove the metal piece, and then cut off the back of the plastic so you just had the switch and this surrounding piece. And then I super glued it into here. The result looks like that. You can see it's glued on from the back with super glue. I also took the screws and cut them off shorter and glued them in place too. Next, I will glue magnets to the back of this so it'll stick to my metal control box. And here's the cover in place. Thank you for watching, and good luck with your chandelier lift.
Really good. That's really good. Now, where are we going to keep the keys?
I don't know.